Before we begin talking about particular mitzvot and the ta'amim of those particular mitzvot, the rationale for those mitzvot, we need to ask ourselves if it's appropriate at all to study Taamei mitzvot. Why wouldn't it be appropriate? There's a Gemara in Brachos that discusses this issue. The Gemara says that if you heard somebody praying the following tefillah, you should stop him. If he says, Al kansi pur yagir rachamecha, then you should silence him. It's an inappropriate prayer. The Gemara then asks, what's so inappropriate about saying Al kansi pur yagir rachamecha? Kansi pur yagir rachamecha invokes, it recalls the particular mitzvah of shiluach haken, the mitzvah of shooing away the mother bird. And here this person is praying, he's saying Al kansi pur yagir rachamecha. What's so inappropriate that your mercy should come to us as it comes perhaps to the bird with that particular mitzvah? What is so inappropriate about praising God or asking God in that manner? The Gemara gives two answers to this question. The first, and it's actually a debate. The first answer is because you're metil kina b'maaseh bereshit. If you invoke God in this manner, you're causing jealousy amongst all the other animals, because there is no such mitzvah with regards to other animals. There is a second answer, however, given in the Gemara. The other answer is because mipnei she'oseh midotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu rachamim ve'inam ele gzerot. You're making the decrees of God, you're making them they have purposes like demonstrating kindness, but the truth is, the purpose of the mitzvot is because they are the decrees of Hashem. What we see from this Gemara is actually there is a debate whether it's appropriate to look for reasons and rationale for the mitzvot at all. The first approach was that absolutely you can. The reason why you shouldn't pray in such a manner, Al kansi po yagir rachamecha, is because you're going to cause jealousy amongst the other animals. However, the second approach in the Gemara is that it's actually unacceptable, because you're taking what perhaps is you're taking something which is godly, and we can have no idea what the true godly intent is, and you're perhaps cheapening it into our own descriptions and to our own personal understanding. There's another Gemara, which is a Gemara in Sanhedrin, which also discusses the reason why the Torah itself, the Torah for most mitzvot, does not give any rationale. It's very rare that we'll see a rationale for a mitzvah accompanying the mitzvah in the Torah. Even Chazal rarely discuss directly reasons or rationale for any particular mitzvah that Hashem gives us. The Gemara in Sanhedrin asks that question. V'amar Rabbi Yitzchak mipnei ma lo nitgalu ta'amei Torah. Rabbi Yitzchak asks, why didn't the Torah tell us the reasons for the mitzvah? And he gives the following answer. There were two mitzvot that it does say in the Torah, and a great king, a great wise man, which was referring to Shlomo HaMelech, he saw this rationale, and he ended up stumbling because of these reasons. One mitzvah is that the king is not allowed to have too many horses. Another mitzvah is that the king is not allowed to have too many wives. For these two particular mitzvot, it says the reasons. One, not so that we should not return to Egypt, and the second, so that the king's many wives should not lead his heart astray. Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, said to himself, I can have many wives, I can have many horses, and I won't be affected. And sure enough, he was affected, and at some point he did return to Egypt. We see that there are reservations towards studying Taamei mitzvot. Another example of what we just saw is essentially a very basic idea. If we knew the rationale for our mitzvah, we may say to ourselves, well, it doesn't apply to me, as Shlomo Melech said, or I can violate the mitzvah and it wouldn't be a problem. For example, if the doctors said today, February 2012, they said that we found that in eating pork, it causes cancer. And the next day, or excuse me, 10 years later, the headlines in the newspapers that the same scientists they know what the problem is of eating pork. They know they've located the particular located the particular problem, and with certain chemicals and enzymes they're able to neutralize the problem, and now it's not unhealthy to eat pork. So what would we say? Would we say that it's now permissible to eat pork? Absolutely not. So that is what the Gemara is essentially telling us, that perhaps we can come to our own conclusions, and even if perhaps it makes sense, but that can eventually lead to the throwing away of the mitzvah. And that's what the Torah was perhaps afraid of, and Chazal as well, when they warned against studying the rationale for mitzvot. On the other hand, there are many positive reasons to study the mitzvot. The Rambam, for instance, says that when we study the rationale for the mitzvot, we realize that there's a sense of chokhmah, there's a sense of wisdom in the Torah. It's not just random. God just didn't give us random mitzvot. Furthermore, performing a mitzvah when we understand the reason why, perhaps an extra added benefit of why Hashem told us to do this mitzvah, can give us an extra love and an extra desire for keeping that mitzvah. Another reason, perhaps, is that when we do a mitzvah, we actually understand what its purpose is. It gives a greater lasting impression on us, and it changes us in a more profound way. So we know there are many benefits, but how we deal with these problems of which we had mentioned. In the end of the day, most Rishonim do offer rationale for mitzvot. Again, I said that in the time of Chazal, it wasn't. The Chazal themselves did not often give rationale for mitzvot, but the Rishonim in the Middle Ages, the rabbis of the Middle Ages, have many books that and offer many reasons for many of the different mitzvot. How are they allowed to do this based on the above with the above issues that we mentioned? So some Rishonim mention that if we keep in mind that when we study the rationale, when we offer rationale for mitzvot, when we study Ta'amim, if we keep in mind that in the end of the day, the reason why we don't keep the mitzvah, we do keep the mitzvah, is because God said so, then it'll keep us from perhaps going in the wrong direction. If we always remember that every single mitzvah is at the bottom line because God said so, we can now go ahead and look for perhaps added benefits which would make us feel, more closer to the mitzvah, more enthused about the mitzvah, as long as we remember that the bottom line reason is because God said so. For example, why not eat not kosher? So the very basic reason is because God said so. Beyond that, maybe it is better for our health. Or another example, why not steal? So you might think, well, it's obvious. There's societal benefits for not stealing. If you have a society where people steal from one another, it's going to you can't live like that. It'll crumble. On the other hand, we have Robin Hood. Robin Hood, he steals from the rich and he gives to the poor, and he's a hero, but he's really a thief in terms of the Torah standards. The reason, therefore, the ultimate reason why we don't steal is because God said so, and that will never lead for us to ever rationalize whether in a particular situation it should be permitted or not be permitted. Before we head into the particulars about into particulars about mitzvot and their benefits, it's worth noting one more idea about doing a mitzvah without understanding why. Imagine a man or a woman who deeply loves their spouse, and once in a while they ask them to do something which doesn't necessarily make sense. When they're deeply in love, they do it just because the person that they love asked them to do it. And so too, sometimes we perform the mitzvah just out of love for Hashem, not necessarily because we know or understand why Hashem wants us to do this, but because of the relationship we have.